So traditionally, when people think about bridging, right, they're thinking about token transfers, right? I have a token on one chain, I want to transfer it to another chain. But that as a process is a very manual, human-intensive labor that everybody needs to do, which we don't want to do, right? What's the end function that you as a user are trying to accomplish often? You either have a token and maybe you want to swap it for a token on the destination chain, or maybe you have a token and you want to use it in an application that's elsewhere, right? And so bridging a token, moving them back and forth and things like that, it's a very old way of doing things where all the work is done by the users. And so general message passing framework kind of flips that upside down and says that applications can be built in a composable way across the ecosystems, right? So meaning that as an application, you can send smart contract requests from one smart contract on one chain to a smart contract on another chain, and you can instead automate a lot of the user pain points for bridging back and forth in your application logic, right? So this is what general message passing allows you to do.
Welcome to Into the Forest with Pine. Today I have Sergey from Axelar. Sergey, can you start off by kind of telling us what Axelar is about?
Yeah, so Axelar is a secure cross-chain interoperability infrastructure. Essentially, what we do is we allow developers and users to build chain-agnostic applications that span the whole of Web3.
Yeah, awesome. So there's kind of a lot of different bridges and like kind of cross-chain architecture. How do you guys kind of see Axelar standing out compared to like, I guess, normal bridges or like kind of cross-chain architecture like Layer Zero or something like that?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Axelar is kind of the only proof of stake secure protocol on the market that's responsible for connecting, different chains and different blockchain ecosystems. I think a lot of the solutions that you see out there in the market, they're pretty centralized, so they rely on a few actors that are doing all of the cross-chain validation. And we've seen attacks over and over on these types of architectures throughout the last year, where many bridges got hacked, right? Whether or not there was a bug or keys compromised behind the scenes. So centralization leads to failure, and we know that. So Axelar is a proof of stake, chain. It's secured by the best kind of security properties at the design layer, and it's augmented with various layers of application layer security kind of add-ons to make that even more robust. So that's one thing. And the second big difference is that Axelar uniquely provides kind of a programmability at the interoperability core, right? And so what that means is that, compared to a lot of the other protocols that are pure message passing frameworks, Axelar itself is a blockchain, right? And so what that means is that you can program a lot of functions around it to make kind of a chain agnostic future easier and make it a reality, right? So as an example, you can automate integrations with the Axelar network, right? Or you can use the Axelar network to launch your token across multiple chains with one click, or you can manage your application across multiple chains and program some of the management logic on Axelar itself, right? So that's really the big differentiator compared to a lot of the competitors as well, is that Axelar sort of is a programmable blockchain, and so you can program sort of at the interoperability layer with the shortest path to any other chain.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So kind of like one of your guys' like biggest like features is like general message passing. So could you kind of explain a little bit about what general message passing is and like how it's kind of currently being used today?
Yeah, so traditionally, when people think about bridging, right, they're thinking about token transfers, right? I have a token on one chain, I want to transfer it to another chain. But that as a process is a very manual, human-intensive labor that everybody needs to do, which we don't want to do, right? What's the end function that you as a user are trying to accomplish often? You either have a token and maybe you want to swap it for a token on the destination chain, or maybe you have a token and you want to use it in an application that's elsewhere, right? And so bridging a token, moving them back and forth and things like that, it's a very old way of doing things where all the work is done by the users. And so general message passing framework kind of flips that upside down and says that applications can be built in a composable way across the ecosystems, right? So meaning that as an application, you can send smart contract requests from one smart contract on one chain to a smart contract on another chain, and you can instead automate a lot of the user pain points for bridging back and forth in your application logic, right? So this is what general message passing allows you to do. And so in the same way as you have composability on a single chain like Ethereum or Solana, where contracts can talk to one another, and from a user's experiences, it's no different, right? Um, we extend this using general message passing across multiple chains. So the end result is that as a user, you can say, I have a token, I see an application, I can directly use that application, right? Like deposit in one click, as an example, without having to move my token, bridge it, wrap it, and so on and so forth. So all of that becomes abstracted away, and all of the user instructions can be written in what we call as like, smart contract calls, aka general message calls.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. And so, like, I think currently one of the killer use cases of general message passing is Squid Protocol, where they allow people to kind of send tokens from one chain to another and receive like any token they want. What do you kind of see as like other big use cases of general message passing that might not be as popular right now, or kind of how do you guys envision the future of like general message passing?
Yeah, so a lot of kind of application onboarding and offboarding flows in some sense are starting to leverage general message passing. So as an example, DYDX launched their own chain within the Cosmos ecosystem, right? They're actually leveraging like the Squid protocol and Axelar to allow users to easily onboard to their chain, right? Behind all this, there's actually like multi-chain interactions that happen back and forth, but all of that is abstracted away, and as a user, you can just deposit your asset in one click. There are interesting applications around cross-chain borrowing and lending markets. So there's an application like a Prime protocol that's built on top of Axelar. It's really novel use case that allows you to borrow and lend your tokens across multiple chains without ever having to bridge them. So everything is one click, one transaction. We see a lot of NFT use cases being built, launching chain agnostic NFTs. Actually, just today, we announced the rollout of this product called Interchain Token Service, where people that want to launch a new chain agnostic token can do everything like in one click. Build on top of Axelar in a very simple portal. So a lot of the applications are starting to leverage that, and that uses general message passing paradigm behind the scenes. And from a user perspective, it's like their token sort of lives everywhere, right? And it's automatically like chain agnostic. Um, RWAs, right? Real world assets is a huge category where we're seeing a lot of demand. So everybody, is trying to either launch, next generation of stable coins that have yield, that have different properties. That's a huge category that we're seeing. Staked or restaked assets is another one, right? So Lido, as an example, recently ran a governance process where kind of Axelar and Wormhole won to deploy, staked ETH on the Binance chain, and that again will leverage like an interesting, protocols of Axelar. So yeah, I think pretty much any use case where you have some type of a product market fit in the market, I think we're seeing that them thinking about how to go kind of cross chain or how to be chain agnostic for their users.
Yeah. So when you guys like talking about kind of the recent vote for the Binance bridge, like how do you guys like see? I guess you talked about kind of Axelar security properties, but how do you see that kind of compared to something like Chainlink, CCIP, or Wormhole or Layer Zero specifically? And like where do you kind of see the benefits from your kind of proof of stake way of doing it?
I mean, the big, lesson that we learned over and over, I would say, in the crypto and in general in building secure systems is that you want to have, a system that's as decentralized as possible to guarantee high tolerance, right? High tolerance of liveness, high tolerance of safety. And so if you look at Axelar, and its proof of stake security, you have the highest number of validators actually across most of the proof of stake networks. The Nakamoto coefficient of Axelar, I think, is like over 30, and we actually use kind of quadratic voting when it comes to proving cross-chain requests. And so this decentralization at the very core of the protocol is what gives you robustness, right? It gives you high liveness. When some nodes go down, your network continues to function. It gives you high safety. But also more importantly is what I mentioned is that because Axelar is open source and it's programmable and it's a chain, what that means is that anybody can build on this ecosystem, anybody can extend it, anybody can innovate on top of it. And if there's one lesson that we learned throughout the history of the internet, it is the open standards and it's the open protocols that actually end up being adopted, right? Like during the beginnings or during the evolution of the internet, kind of every large company had their own internet protocol, if you call it so, right? Everybody had their own network, but they're not the ones that we use today. And the protocols and the networks that we use today were the open permissionless networks where anybody could plug in, anybody could extend, anybody could innovate. And so that's a huge differentiator with Axelar. The philosophy in the ecosystem and the core technology is that it is an open protocol. It gives you high safety, it gives you high standard, but it also invites the community to build upon it, extend their connections, continue innovating. And I think we're seeing lots of partners that are building their own connections to Axelar now, right? Without even like the initial development teams, which is like incredibly exciting to see. And that's kind of only possible with the Axelar stack.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when like teams are kind of thinking about building apps and they kind of have the choice between building like cross-chain apps or more like atomic-based apps, maybe on Ethereum or Solana, how do you kind of see like the pros and cons of like these different building styles?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, right? Like, as a developer, you should think about a couple different trade-offs, right? One is like, of course, your software stack. Two, the cost of the users, and three, distribution. Okay, so assuming you have preferences with software stack, maybe use like Ethereum or Solana. That's like one choice you have to make. On the cost, again, you go to base Ethereum, you're always subject to like high gas fees, right? But if you go to like an L2 or some of these other L1 ecosystems, your cost goes down, but then you automatically have to start thinking about distribution, right? How do you get users in? How do you get users out? And how do I make sure that my application is accessible to as many crypto or Web3 users as possible, right? And so if you build it in silo, without connectivity, then your distribution is limited. And that may be okay, by the way, for some applications, right? If you're still kind of figuring out how to get your first like 100 or 1,000 users and you don't know like a product market fit, you just need a small community. Maybe you need a passionate community that can play with the application, give you feedback. And so you can launch on top of these, more isolated chains or layer twos and take it from there. But if you have an application and you're convincing the product market fit and you're looking for scale, you're looking for distribution, you're looking for as easy on and off ramps as possible for your users, you need to think about interoperability right away, right? And so that's really what we're seeing today is where, let's say, the applications that had the product market fit throughout the last few years in crypto, they're all thinking for the next version of themselves of how do I incorporate interoperability at the core of my stack, right? And for some of the newer applications, I would say they fall into one of these two categories where, some of them are still like kind of experimenting in the product market fit. And in that case, just launch somewhere, right? Like get a couple of users, make sure people like your application. But if you are looking to scale, if you are looking to grow, if you're looking for as easy of on and off ramps as possible for users, then you have to think about interoperability from day one. It might not be a core of your product on day one, but you have to have a kind of a service strategy, right? How you're going to migrate to it, how you're going to update to those types of experiences for your users down the line. And I would say from a user's perspective, this interoperability engraved in the application is becoming more and more as a must-have, right? Users are going to be less and less exposed to bridging tokens and moving across chains. And so the better you can make your experience, I think the more users you can capture in that process.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. How do you guys kind of think about like chain abstraction and like how do you guys kind of see your role in kind of creating like a simplified user experience where they like don't really have to like pay attention to what chain they're interacting in? Like, how do you guys think about like this user experience going forward?
I mean, I think it's super important, right? It's exactly what we want to get to is that as a user, you should be able to use any asset on any chain with one click. In some sense, we already have some early primitives of chain abstraction engraved into the Axelar architecture and the protocols. So as an example, if you're submitting a cross-chain transaction, you only pay gas on the source chain, and that's it. Okay, you don't have to think about paying gas like on the Axelar chain. You don't have to think about paying gas on the destination chain. Even if your transaction touches like 5 chains, your gas will automatically be paid on top of those 5 chains. So you never have to even hold the token there, right? So you can use these primitives to onboard to a new ecosystem easier, execute your cross-chain requests as easy as possible, and I think that's definitely kind of the future, being able to abstract the chain interactions from the users.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you guys are kind of changing topics a little bit, like thinking about kind of the Axelar token, how do you guys kind of see the use of your network and the general message passing kind of relate to like the token's demand and stuff like that?
Yeah, so Axelar, being a proof of stake network, is powered by proof of stake token, right? You use it to for security of the network. Anybody delegates to the validators that are responsible for validating the cross chain protocol, and the token is used to pay fees for processing these cross chain messages, right? So every time you are sending a cross chain call, even if you're directly not doing it, but there's actually gas that gets paid to the Axelar network itself, right? There's actually a pretty interesting post on the kind of community forum at Axelar, describing some of the tokenomic updates to the network itself, subject to various governance approvals and implementation details. But effectively, the network is continuing to transition into being less inflationary, introducing various security mechanisms to leverage the Axelar token more, to be able to onboard more of these chains, and actually switching to like a gas burning mechanism where the fees that are paid used to kind of offset the inflation. So yeah, I would encourage folks to kind of check out those community forums at the Axelar forum, and you'll be able to find more details.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. People should check that out. When you guys are thinking about kind of like on the developer side, when like developers are thinking of building an app, what do you guys kind of see the distinction of people using like smart contract platforms to kind of build these chains or kind of building their own app chain and kind of like going out into the future? Do you think that people will migrate more towards app chains and like these general like smart contract platforms will kind of grow less and less popular as it is easier to spin up a chain? And like how do you guys kind of think about stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, when people ask about kind of accelerating like demand for interoperability, these days I say like everybody wants their own chain, right? But not you have a good reason or a bad reason, and I think that's the demand of the market that we're seeing. I think there are some good reasons where some of the applications that are further down the line that are mature, they want to have kind of control of their own stack. Right? They want to be able to control the fees. They want to be able to control performance. They want to be able to control user experiences, and for that you need to have like your own app chain one way or another, but that comes at the cost of in some sense fragmentation, right? And having to think about on and off ramps, interoperability, and everything else beyond it. I mean, that being said, I think there's still a huge value behind global shared composable environments, right? Like Solana, like Swio, like Aptos of the world. And I think we're still seeing, quite an interest in ecosystems being built around those. So I would say those two stacks, kind of sort of monolithic versus these app chains, have their own, or will probably find their own like product market fits in some sense, right? Where again, like if you're a developer where just wants to write a few lines of code in a smart contract, get some distribution, be able to compose with that applications easier, kind of go to market in 2 weeks, you go to a shared environment, right? Like you just launch there, that's it. But if you are at later stage, maybe you are a little bit more mature, or you do want to have control over your software deployment for one reason or another, I think sort of app chains in the future. So I almost see them as like being useful at different phases of the project life cycles.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. So I guess at Axelar, what are you guys kind of excited for kind of going forward, and what kind of things are you kind of working on at Axelar that kind of is on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so one super exciting thing is this interchain token service that I just mentioned that we announced this morning. I think we're seeing huge demand for people launching their tokens cross chain. That's one, and the second, I think the ecosystem is working pretty aggressively towards launching the virtual machine on Axel itself, and that's gonna open up this programmability layer to the whole other level that I mentioned. You'll be able to like automate your integrations with Axel. You'll be able to deploy some application logic on it that can touch like every other chain, in less than 5 seconds. So yeah, I think, for the whole ecosystem, that's a big push for the remainder of the year. We're seeing a lot of custom connections being made to Axelar by various developers, right? So we have connections being built, from Sui Network, from Stellar, from, Solana. So a lot of these kind of monolithic stacks that are really incredibly performant and have kind of growing user bases also being connected through the Axelar ecosystem, which I think is going to be awesome.
Yeah, that's exciting. Kind of zooming out, or I guess more talking about yourself, like how did you kind of get involved in crypto and kind of what like led your journey to coming to work at Axelar?
Yeah, I mean, my background is in cryptography and distributed systems, right? So I think when I was finishing grad school, at MIT back in 2014, 2015, this is when I started to work on the blockchains and like take a look at some of the early designs. So I helped to, design and take to the market the Algorand blockchain with my co-founder Yorgos. So those are some of the early, innings in some sense in the crypto blockchain space. And then, since then, I think I'm continuing to be more and more excited about the stack and its potential, right? And now, with a lot of the issues that we're seeing, in global financial systems with, AI also, right? Having issues around kind of data ownership and provenance, I think blockchain technology has a much greater role to play than ever before. And so, yeah, super excited to kind of keep building here.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think this is a good way to end things off. Thank you for coming on and talking about Axelar.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.